Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Abby Schonecker, Marketing Specialist at Spok, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today we'll be talking about 7 must-ask business continuity questions. Tom Sain, Chief Information Officer at Spok, will discuss our business continuity survey results, and Tracy Roberts and Judy Martinez from Harris Health System will discuss how they put their business continuity plan to the test during Hurricane Harvey. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone will be muted during today's webinar, but we welcome your participation. Please submit your questions via the questions box in the GoToWebinar toolbar, and then Tom, Tracy, and Judy will answer as many questions as time allows after the presentation. A recording of this webinar and the presentation slides will be sent to all registrants tomorrow, so please feel free to share these with others at your organization. At the end of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to complete an evaluation. We'd love it if you could take a couple of minutes to complete this survey. Your feedback helps our efforts to provide you with relevant and informative presentations. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom, who will begin our presentation.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully this will be insightful for you and you'll get some information out of it that you can take back to your organizations. For today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about business continuity in general, as well as some results from a CHIME survey we participated in. And then Tracy and Judy are going to give you some real-world experience that they had during a hurricane environment in their hospital system. And then we'll take as many questions as we can at the end. So with that, we'll jump right into it. And then really the general consensus, what is business continuity? And business continuity is taking a very proactive approach to pre-planning for disasters. There are going to be disasters, whether they're man-made, natural, terroristic, cybersecurity. There will be disasters within every organization out there. To the extent of the disaster and how frequently is out of our control. But business continuity really is taking a proactive approach to planning for those in documenting what's going to be done, how we're going to recover systems, how we're going to communicate, how we're internally and external to your organization, etc. So it's really to move from a proactive, a system failed, what do we do, to having a scripted approach to moving forward in a disaster scenario. Next slide, please. Spok partnered with CHIME earlier this year, in January this year, and 41 of CHIME CIOs were nice enough to respond to a multi-question survey that we published with CHIME to get a feel for what's going on in the healthcare community, specifically around business continuity and preparedness for business restoration. And again, business continuity is just not an IT issue. It's a company-wide or hospital-wide initiative, and it covers not only the technologies, but the resources, both electronic and systems, but also people, and having a plan in place to recover and communicate during the issue. Like I said, we were lucky enough to have 41 respondents to our survey, and I think you'll glean some very interesting information out of the results of that survey. The next slide, please. The first question resolved around awareness for the need to prepare and testing of your plan. But one data point we gleaned, not from the survey, but from other sources, was as a result of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, 57% of companies affected say they would put in place or enhance their business continuity or disaster recovery plans. That tells me that a lot of organizations were not as prepared as they needed to be. And one way to validate you are prepared is to do testing. And one of our questions resulted about how often organizations test their business continuity plans. Not surprising to me, 56% test annually. If you are a HIPAA compliant organization, really you have to test annually at a minimum to go there. But what really surprised me is 14% never tested their plan. And you know, that concerns a little bit because, really need to test your plan. Now, I think some people don't test their plans because their organizations are truly 24/7, 365-day operations, and they can't take down their production systems simply to test your business continuity or disaster recovery plans. But within a business continuity community, they really document various methods for testing your plans. Spok, for example, our wireless environment truly is a 24/7, 365-day a year operation, and we can't disrupt operations simply to test our recovery plans. But one of the documented and approved methods for testing your disaster recovery is doing what's called a tabletop test, where I'll walk into our operations center and declare a disaster, and then our operations staff marshals the troops as if it was a disaster into a conference room, and we walk through what each organization person and communications would happen, and the flow of how would we respond to a disaster in that environment. So don't be afraid to do a tabletop test against systems or subsystems if they are truly 24/7 and you don't want to disrupt your operations to do a test. But you can also do some offline tests, like we take a backup or to test our backup methodologies. We test that quarterly, that we take a sampling of our backups and restore them to an offline system to validate the media is valid and we can restore from a backup. So you just understand that your testing doesn't have to be all inclusive. You can test subcomponents of your plan. You can do tabletop testing. You can do complete restoration testing, and test different parts of your plan at different intervals. But please do test. Next slide. This is another area where we find that a lot of organizations perceive business continuity strictly as an IT function. And again, it's not strictly an IT function. And you can see that most of the respondents focus their plans and the data on data recovery and system recovery, with their data centers being recovered at 95%. That's great, that the data is there, but you can see it walks off fairly quickly down to radiology information. Only at 48% of those have business continuity plans. And as healthcare organizations, all the things listed on this screen are critical to patient care and need to be part of your overall business continuity plan as you move forward. So don't just think it's an IT function. Get all your organizations and all your systems in place when it comes to business continuity. Next slide, please. All right, and then this was a little bit surprising to me. Is not all systems and functions are covered. Like I said, again, people perceive it as an IT environment, but 59% of people said they had no business continuity plan related to their power plant. And Sandy was a great example, Hurricane Sandy, where power plants and got disruptive, and that was, you can't run a hospital without power. The same with connectivity, both internal and external Wi-Fi networks or datacom, voice communications. When you're looking at your business continuity, you have to take the holistic approach and go from the power plant, datacom, all the way up through systems, and take some of these items in this slide to heart, that if your plan does not include them, really consider adding them to your plan and figuring out what you're going to do. Do you have a generator for power plant recovery? Is the generator and or the fuel for your generator in a flood zone, or is it in a location that can sustain a flood? Is it in a hardened bunker that can sustain other disaster type effects through tornadoes, if you're in a tornado plane, et cetera? Think of all those things to keep the entire infrastructure, not just your IT systems, in place and recoverable during a disaster. So you can and make sure it's documented in your plan for testing. We test our backup power plant every Tuesday morning we exercise our power plant just to make sure it stays in place and it'll be there when we need it. And that's fully documented in our business continuity planning exercises. Next slide, please. This is one that I think Tracy and Judy are going to talk extensively about, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But how do you keep track of your staff and employees? And it's not just, you know, your doctors and nurses, but your administrative staff and your financial staff that can make decisions during a disaster on how to recover and how to recover quickly. You know, in the survey, we showed that 41% of people do have secondary protocols in place to track their employees and communicate with their employees during a disaster. But surprisingly, 30% don't have any secondary protocols. I know in my dealings, you know, being around healthcare IT for about 30 years, a lot of the customers we deal with, you know, understand that they have not only primary but secondary and tertiary communications plans. But as you can see, 30% of people don't even have secondary plans. So please ensure that your business continuity plan and disaster recovery planning address how you're going to communicate with your staff and find people that can come in and help you if your primary communication protocols are down, which most likely they will be during a disaster. Next slide, please. This is one that's a challenge for everybody in the industry. We know that revenue in the healthcare space is shrinking and the operating cost is increasing. And everybody is challenged to do more with less. And in fact, 61% of respondents to our survey were looking for ways to cut costs without adding risk to their portfolio and their business. So it is a challenge. So you have to work collaboratively across all your departments and figure out ways to you know, to make sure you have business continuity and and disaster recovery plans in place. And you can do them without some significant cost. You know, if you work as a team, you can figure out ways to do it and document it and recover from it. But it is a challenge, and people need to figure out ways to move forward with that in the challenging economic environment we're all working in, because the cost of disasters are significant. You know, average recovery cost of $1 million infrastructure and $1.2 million in operational damage, you know, is a significant cost. So if you can spend, you know, a few $1,000s building out your plan or bolstering your plan, that's a very good ROI for your business people to understand. And in fact, the costs are even higher when you isolate it to cybersecurity attacks. The cost of recovering from a cybersecurity attack, not only recovering your systems, but your reputation is significant. So there's definitely documentation and guidance out there that help you build an ROI or a return on your investment for any spend you may wish to put into bolstering your business continuity plans. Next slide, please. This is one that's becoming more popular out there. I'm not sure it's as popular as this slide indicates. Only 71% of our respondents do not use disaster recovery as a service or cloud-based recovery, but that's primarily because I think not a lot of hospitals are moving a lot of their systems into the cloud, so they're not really looking at cloud recovery services. But I think you're going to see that increase over time. If your organization is looking at moving certain functions into the cloud, you know, think about recovery of the cloud as well, and or just using cloud-based services for systems instead of buying extra hardware in an offsite data center that you own and maintain. Maybe commissioning with Azure or AWS or Google or Rackspace or someone to have servers available to you on demand and recovering your network in the cloud as a temporary recovery source while you rebuild your data center or you rebuild your operations after a natural disaster or disaster of some sort. So I think you'll see an increase in this in time. And I think it's an economic way, again, of looking at how to build recovery capability without investing in a significant amount of hardware that sits cold, waiting for a disaster. Next slide, please. This is another one that that I deal a lot with, because obviously we're a vendor to a lot of healthcare organizations, and I talk to risk managers and I talk to healthcare providers of what are Spok's business continuity plans and recovery plans, and how do they play into the hospital or the healthcare organization's plans. And the results show that 56% of the vendors do rely on the support of their key vendors for recovery, and that's a good thing. You know, the 24% that do not use their support is you know, a little troublesome. I would hope that you would, anytime you're using a vendor, you would incorporate their business continuity plans as adjunct to your own, and making sure to challenge vendors like Spok. Do you have a business continuity plan? Are you testing it? Can you share your test results with us? You know, and then factoring that into your overall plan as you prepare to or update your business continuity disaster recovery plans. So I know I covered that pretty quick. I wanted to, for a reason, because I think Tracy and Judy are going to give you some real life experience, and they're going to talk about some stuff that they dealt with during a hurricane that's going to drive some of these points home, and not just talking about survey results, but real life experiences. So with that, we'll turn it over to Tracy and Judy.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Roberts. I'm the Senior Call Center Manager of Operator Services here at Harris Health, and I've been here for 9 years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judy Martinez. I'm currently the Supervisor of Operator Services. I have been with Harris Health System for 8 years.
Next slide. An overview of Harris Health. Harris Health System is located in Houston, Texas, and provides care for the residents of Harris County. Harris Health System is the 4th largest public healthcare system in the U.S. We are affiliated with 2 medical programs, Baylor College of Medicine and the University of Texas. Ben Taub General Hospital is a world-renowned level 1 trauma center with 444 licensed acute care beds, and provides a wide range of specialty care outpatient services. Lyndon B. Johnson Hospital is a 207 licensed bed acute care hospital with nearly expanded level 3 trauma center and a distinguished regional center for neonatal intensive care for high-risk deliveries. Next slide. These are our challenges we had encountered before the Spok solution. The word manually is in several places on this slide. Manual updates, manual paging, manual dialing, manual transfers, no one source of truth that house all information, paper-based on-call schedules, which we're currently still transitioning, and no backup database. Next slide. This slide shows the different swim lanes or avenues an operator would have to determine to travel down when processing one call. And this was before pre-Spok. There were a possibility of 5 to 6 different sources or programs an operator would have to consider utilizing to process a call. Also, the main database was an access database, which was manually updated with pager, cell, and directory information when notified via paper sources. Just think, over 100,000 calls a month were processed via this method, including manual transferring and paging via phone. Next slide. This is our call flow today. How wonderful. As you can see, all calls are processed from one system, one platform, with the exception of the Epic patient information, which is a future integration. All employee contact information is automatically fed via Active Directory every 2 hours to ensure we're processing calls to the correct contact information. Next slide. Next slide. So the results, with having the Spok solution, we're able to reduce our average handle time by 20 to 30%, which allowed the department to take on handling new call types. Processing over 50,000 page calls manually, we experienced numerous errors and no records to show who was physically paged. Paging via Spok virtually eliminates errors and creates a page log. During bad weather or disaster situations, when staff cannot travel to the office, on-call schedules can be assessed via web of Citrix, and the department leader can make the necessary updates, and those changes can immediately flow to the operator. Also, with the Spok solution, we're able to set up and maintain a disaster recovery location in case our team needed to relocate from our main office, which is located in the basement of our hospital. Next slide. So our business continuity plan established a disaster recovery room with the assistance of hospital leadership and IT personnel, where the operators could relocate to and still continue to handle calls. There was 3 functional computers with phones with Spok software. We tested monthly. The room was on emergency power in case of a power outage. We had red phones or backup phones in case of the ACD lines went down. And also the room had additional network lines, phones, and ports for additional equipment to be relocated to the room if needed. Next slide. So now we turn it over to Judy Martinez, who will share a story through Hurricane Harvey as she lived through this Hurricane Harvey disaster here at the office.
So thank you, Tracy, and I hope everyone listening in today takes some valuable information from our personal experience through Harvey. So as everyone knows, Harvey was one of the costliest disasters in U.S. history, and even now we still have people that are trying to recover from this horrible storm. So I personally never imagined seeing neighborhoods and highways disappearing underwater and having to watch it all unfold in the hospital while spending 5 days definitely made it more unbelievable. But nevertheless, next slide, preparation was key in order for our department to continue to run as normal. So to paint a picture, our office, of course, is located in the basement of the office. Days before the storm, we tested our disaster room on the 2nd floor. We wanted to ensure that all of our Spok software was functional in the event that we had to move. And on Saturday morning, that disaster room was definitely put to the test. So that morning, our overhead speakers were crackling in the basement office. And as we were having a shift change, one of the operators ran back into the office. There is water coming out of the elevators and running down the stairs into the hallway. So we had to immediately react. 3 of our employees headed over to our disaster recovery room. And while the rest of us were trying to grab necessary materials, the emergency line rang. So staff needed us to process a medical emergency page. Next slide. So although we had multiple events going on, we were able to remain calm because we had a plan in place. And in less than 15 to 20 minutes, we had transitioned from our basement office to our disaster room. At the end, we had learned that our office had about 1.5 feet of water. And luckily, our PCs and phones were not damaged. And thanks to the great relationship we have with IT, we had moved all of our 15 phones and PCs to our disaster room by the following Wednesday. Once the water receded, we were able to access our area. If you look at the picture on the top left, behind those closed doors are the stairs where the mini waterfall had formed. The bottom picture shows you the patch our office, still submerged under the water, and that was after some of the water had receded. The top right is a recovery room where we stayed up until the month of February of this year. Next slide. Every department is valuable, and having our own departmental recovery plan was beneficial not only to our employees, the organization, and the community we serve. It took the anxiety of all of our employees since it was a seamless transition. As our hospital became an island surrounded by water, we were able to continue to serve our internal staff and the community calling for help. I remember so many patients telling us they could not believe we were in that building. So developing a business continuity plan that was easy to execute during an emergency was critical for our success. Now back to Tracy.
Okay, next slide. Thank you, Judy. In conclusion, and just to recap a few items, with the movement of equipment, of course, computers and phones were mixed up. However, we experienced minor issues, but none with the Spok software. Due to our disaster recovery location being set up and the robust Spok system all on one platform, there was no downtime experienced in the operations. We later found out that many members of leadership didn't even realize that the operators had totally been relocated to another location because we were able to continue to handle calls as if nothing occurred. Due to this situation, we have future plans to establish an additional off-site DR location in our scheduling call center in case of an evacuation or extreme high call volume due to an emergency situation. The plans are to cross-train some of the scheduling staff to handle those most priority calls in these types of situations. Next slide. So now we'll turn it back over to Abby for any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much for that insightful presentation. We'll now take some time to answer your questions, and it looks like we've had a few submitted already. But as a reminder, if you have a question, please submit it in the questions box, and we'll answer as many as time allows. Okay, so our first question is, how can I build a business case for developing a business continuity plan? And we'll give this one to Tom.
Thank you, Abby. Again, like I talked about a little bit earlier, is understand the financial impacts of a disaster and work backwards a little bit from that. If you understand what your financial impact could be to operations, then you can say, okay, if we have a disaster that lasts this long, and there's plenty of formulas of lost man hours, lost patient revenue, loss of systems availability, those kind of things, you can figure out what your cost of a disaster would be. Then you can estimate the likelihood of a disaster and the duration of the disaster and put a dollar value on it. Some of that is subjective that you would work with your management on to come to agreement on that. And then from there, you can figure out what a realistic cost would be to recover from a disaster in that respect. So partner with your financial team and your operations teams, factor in the cost of a disaster, the likelihood of disaster based on duration and type, and then figure out a reasonable expense that you could add to your budget to recover and prevent that from happening.
Great, thank you. And another attendee asks, who should be involved when putting together a business continuity plan? And Tom, will you take that one as well?
I'll give you my 2 cents, but I think Tracy has some real world experience she can add to it. Is to me, it's got to be a full cross-functional environment. As the owner of Spok's business continuity plan, I depend on every area of the company. Our marketing department has to be involved because they'll handle PR and communications outside of the company. Obviously, our IT department has to be involved because they'll get our systems up. Facilities has to be involved to help us recover our facilities and or find us temporary facilities to move our employees if we have to. HR has to be involved to make sure that we are accounting for all of our personnel, and where any special circumstances like hotels or whatever, we can get them into in an expeditious fashion. Finance has to sign off on any large purchases that are above my signature if I have to be involved in it. Obviously, your executive leadership needs to be there because they will be the face of the company and communications to it. Your support organizations like call centers. So it really is, there's no department that should not be involved in your business continuity planning, including your clinicians. Your clinical leadership has to be aware of your business continuity planning and understand what's going to happen during a disaster and how you're going to support them, so they can also identify areas where you may not be thinking about what additional things that they would need to keep patients safe and healthy during a disaster.
Great. And Tracy or Judy, if you have anything to add.
We definitely agree with Tom. It is a collaboration of all the departments, not just one, because everybody has a piece in that business continuity plan. So definitely involve all the departments for that feedback and for that assistance.
Great, thank you. And another attendee has asked, is it necessary to have a business continuity plan in place even if my hospital isn't located somewhere that experiences natural disasters like hurricanes? And Tom, if you want to take that one.
I would say yes. I mean, the example we gave was the result of a hurricane, and that's one of the most likely, but even more so today, a cyber attack, and they're all over the news. Everybody has to deal with them, and healthcare has been a big target for cyber attacks. If there's a cyber attack or ransomware or something to that effect, you may need to implement your business continuity plan if your IT systems or your computer systems are locked up, or someone hacked into your refrigeration systems and you can't keep refrigeration plant running in your hospital. So there are all kinds of threats that we face today that are not natural disasters. So whether you live in a hurricane zone or tornado zone, our Eden Prairie office in Minnesota had 17 inches of snow this last weekend. Would that have precluded some of the critical employees from getting an office? Possibly. You may not declare that a disaster, but having plans for those type of things if your office is uninhabitable. In Manhattan, we have an office in Manhattan. There are all kinds of things. Presidential visits shut down streets and makes it hard for employees to get in and out of offices, et cetera. So business continuity is not just for a physical natural disaster. Think of it as any disruption or catastrophic disruption to your business, maybe not on a whole, or but at a clinic level or an office level. That is exactly what it's not just disaster recovery, it's business continuity. How do you keep your business running if a subset or your whole business is disrupted for any reason whatsoever?
Great, thank you. And it looks like that's the end of our questions today, so this concludes our webinar. If you'd like to chat with a Spok representative on the topics that we've discussed today, you can do so using the link in your chat box. And you can also continue the conversation with fellow attendees by using the hashtag SpokWebinar on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to get all of the latest news from Spok, as well as industry news and trends. Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this webinar. Have a great rest of your day.